oh, so the conversations I tend to have, as you know, like about neurodivergency, and like I invited you on, as I know you're autistic yourself and have disabilities. So do you want to, let you know, do you want to start by introducing yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Leena Farhat. I live in North Wales. I am a town councillor in my community of Llanfairfychan. And I am on the spectrum. I'm autistic. I've had to go through, assessment process and that sort of thing to get my diagnosis, and part of that is still ongoing, which is, strenuous in itself. Yeah.
Oh, so you're still going through the formal process of sorting your diagnosis out, is it?
Yeah. So I had a diagnosis when I was younger. And then when I moved up to North Wales, they asked that it should be updated. So I've had to go back through assessment. Because I moved health systems a lot when I was younger.
All right, so this must be quite odd then, having to like already got like some sort of formal diagnosis and having to go through the diagnostic process again. Oh, Christ.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot, and I don't remember doing it the first time because I was a child. And now I'm starting to go through it myself. So it's with the North Wales Autism Service. And basically they just send you out some paperwork that you have to fill in, and then they get you set up for a set of assessments. So I'm still waiting on the first one, but that should be booked in pretty soon. But yeah, it's different doing it as an adult, I think.
Yeah, I should imagine, because like I was diagnosed myself when I was about 10, and like from that, like I wouldn't remember like the diagnostic process, or when much about like why was like an assessment sorted. And so what age was it when you like were first diagnosed and discovered as being autistic?
I think it was around the age of 6 or 7. I know it was in my first year of school, so I think I must have been about 6 or 7 at that point. And it was a teacher that had picked up on some of the stuff I was doing. I mean, obviously, so I'm 25, and I think conversations around autism have changed quite a bit over the years, and the way that we pick that up, especially in kids. So it was a teacher that had pointed out to my parents that I struggled to look in people's eyes when I was talking to them, which, is sort of one of the traditional points, but equally just that I didn't feel the need to have many friends. I didn't feel the need to be social at break time, and maybe I should go for an assessment. And I did. And I think the one thing I remember at the time was that I was always told that like girls were better at masking.
Yeah.
And I've always felt like I've not been very good, and it's something that I've had to practice over the years. And it's something I think that when you work with people, you become acutely more aware. So I know that like within politics, it's kind of interesting. One of the county councillors that has mentored me over a few years now is also autistic, and we have a lot of conversations around masking in public contexts and how do you work a room, and actually learning how to do that, in terms of making those connections with people to get them to feel comfortable, to get them to open up to you, but still, making sure that you don't appear cold, or you don't appear disinterested in their problems, or that you're approaching issues with a lot of tact. And I think that, I don't know, from a politics perspective, that is something that you have to learn. I think when you're sort of anywhere on the spectrum, really, I think you have to learn it. And it's something that a lot of other people don't think about. I remember when I first got involved in politics, I was asking people questions like, how do you work a room? How do you know which people to go and talk to? How do you know, where to start? And I didn't realize that other people didn't really think about that. But for me, I would happily, if I hadn't learned those skills, just stand in a corner and wait for people to maybe come up to me. But realistically, that's not how it works.
Yeah, because like I was saying, you're like involved in politics at like a town council level, and you're a party activist within the Liberal Democrats. So and it's like that thing, like probably when you enter that space in an arena, it's hard to know then as an autistic person, how to find yourself included, access, like finding yourself access in that space where, as I said, you feel included, and you feel like you're progressing in the space, and can find yourself easily involved. And I guess from like autistic, neurodivergent people, getting involved in politics, that can be quite a hard thing to get to achieve. And there's definitely different barriers with the social aspects of it.
Yeah, I think you're completely right on that, and I see it. So like I said, I work with this county councillor who, is a fair few years older than me. I think he's in his 50s now, but he was diagnosed quite late in life. I think he got his diagnosis when he was 40.
Yeah.
So that's again like a different story, but he realized that he was doing those things without the diagnosis and just doing it on his own. And now sort of conversely, I work with a lot of our younger activists, and I've got, quite a few autistic activists who I can see myself in. So things like, we've just had our party conference, and one of our members on our Welsh Young Liberals exec wanted to make a speech, but felt that he wasn't sure he could, because he was like, well, I'm autistic, I'm not good at talking in front of people. And I was like, I don't know, that shouldn't be a barrier, that shouldn't be something that you're worried about. And equally, no one's going to call you out for stuttering, for saying something wrong, for taking a break while you're talking. No one will do that. And I think it's about making sure that people feel comfortable. And I think especially with what I find with a lot of autistic people is we hold ourselves to a very high standard. Yeah. I'm not sure why that is, but we do. And we'll just like, I don't know, like if you stutter in the middle of a sentence, you're like, oh my God, this person is going to think about it for ages now. But realistically, that's not the case. So I don't know, it's about supporting people to not do those things, I think, and to try and just in a way normalize the way we are. And equally, autism manifests itself so differently in different people. So some things that I understand, or that are things that I do, not everybody else does, or things that they cope with. So for example, one thing that I struggle with, that I'm getting a lot better at, is like sensory triggers. So I used to be really bad with sound and touch. So things like I really didn't like touching chalk. I don't know why, but chalk was something I couldn't do. Sounds, there are certain sounds that will trigger me, to stem a bit, or that sort of thing. And even just thinking about chalk, you can see my fingers do this. I don't like it, just certain feelings I don't like, but that's not something that all people with autism have or would understand. It's an interesting, I don't know, I think there's an interesting talk to be had. And actually I'm curious to know how many politicians are autistic in any way. I think that would be really interesting to find out.
Yeah, because it is definitely something interesting to find out, and something that I think as like a developer of this podcast and like on this channel, and to be able to like explore that, as when to be able to see this as a space that can encourage disabled, neurodivergent people to have like an open conversation and like discuss issues that are important to them, and like actually like discuss any like politically active campaigns that like support them with disability and neurodivergency and of intersectional issues. And it's about having that conversation to like actually being using this as a place to start to drive change. And as you were saying, then with like the socials settings then and all the high standards. I think that from when you said that from a young age, you know, like you learn the skill of masking, like even like the your council mentor who's got diagnosed later on in life, you know, masked himself. And I think that overanalyzation and, you know, really overthinking those social situations is often down to the masking.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it really plays a big part. And I think it's not just that. I think that on the flip side, you know, weirdly, what I find with a lot of autistic people within politics is that they're very data driven, like they're very comfortable reading a lot, like reading massive documents or reading lots of numbers or and telling you what's going on. But then when you ask them to explain it, you might not understand the explanation that comes out. And I'm guilty of that. So that's, I think, another skill that's learned in terms of like, how do you convey what it is you want to say in a way that other people will understand?
Yeah. And yeah, as I said, that aspect, because I was saying that with autism, it's like you got like different like skills and then different like, because you know like we all get our like own like certain specific kind of language or like way of communication that can be different to an autistic person. And then I think from that, those type of things can definitely knock on people's confidence of getting involved in certain workplace careers if they can't, you know, write or comprehend things in a way that another person may, you know, prefer to read it or like see things as. But then, you know, looking at things from a different lens is quite valuable.
Yeah, and I think that one thing I think that's worked quite well, again, it's come from this mentor. He was like, one thing that is really good to do is to take your special area of interest and make that your policy area. So I know I've got one friend who's younger than me and active within the Welsh Liberal Democrats, and I said this to him. I was like, look, you know everything there is to know about buses, anything, bus routes, bus models. He can tell you what kind of bus you're on just by a picture of you on a seat on a bus, and he will be able to tell you what bus it is. And I was like, you can make that your niche policy area, because if you know that that's something that you enjoy, you know that's something that you're interested in learning more about and keeping up to date with, that in itself, like, we have the ability to sort of take those areas of interest and be the expert on that one thing. You don't need to be an expert on everything. You can be an expert in, you know, in your special area of interest. So for this councillor, for example, he used to work for the Ordnance Survey, so he's really good at maps, looking at maps and the history of maps, and that was his area. For me, it's you know, it's more like equality and diversity policy. I find that, like, I can tell you an awful lot about it in terms of legislation and that sort of thing, and I really enjoy it. And there's no like, usually in politics and even in life, people sort of want you to know everything about everything, but I think it's better to be like good at one specific thing than sort of average at a bunch of things. Like that is a model that works well, I think, for people with autism.
Yeah, definitely it does help, and you know, adds advantage to the, you know, like when you're in a career space, whereas like politics, and then in like a general field of the workplace, that, you know, for when autistic people can find themselves in a workplace and get a career in what they are interested in. It's like that as their focused interests can provide a beneficial skill set, as you have found when you know, like you're focused with your own like campaigning and, you know, position within the party, doing a lot of equality and diversity. And as a young disabled queer woman of colour, you probably found that as the, you know, being belonging to different intersectional groups and minority backgrounds, that has inspired you to do a lot of diversity and equality and speak up within a party on that issue.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's played a big part in it. but I think also that like I find it a good way to like meet people and practice meeting people. When you work in these sorts of intersectional things, like it's easier to start a conversation with people when you know that they have something in common with you. For me, I think that was where I found that place of comfort, is that I know that there's a commonality there. When you are sort of a part of a demographic that is a minority, realistically, it's easier to start that conversation. That was one thing I've always struggled with, and I think it could be down to my autism, is how do you approach starting a conversation? It's not something that I've mastered even now. But,
because
you know, it's a way that I cope with it.
As you say, not because it's like, you know, sometimes there's small talk, or like how beyond small talk, how you can like continue on a conversation can be quite difficult for an autistic person. And I think it's then, you know, what people don't sometimes understand about autistic people, or what is misinterpreted and people get wrong, is that autistic people might not want to socialize, or, you know, have that kind of socially involved life. And like, as you've proven, you know, that's something that you went, and finding yourself within spaces focusing on diversity and equality has allowed you to find, you know, like people who are like-minded, different life experiences. And I think from that, you know, we can feel less alone, and, you know, if it gives you that sense of community. And I think that type of sense of community is definitely beneficial, you know. Hello? Hello?
Oh, yeah, I think you cut out.
All right. Well, I was just saying that, you know, I guess from, like, as I said, what people understand is like there's lack of social, sometimes feel like autistic people lack the interest in socialization, and you kind of prove that wrong, that, you know, like, yeah, you do probably want a social life and to socialize. So, and, you know, that's something that a lot of people misunderstand about autistic people. And within a space of diversity and equality has given you, like, you access to, you know, being involved in a community with like-minded people, and like people like yourself, and which is quite important to find, like, because it makes you feel less alone.
Yeah, I think that it's a complete misconception that autistic people don't like to socialize. I think we just socialize differently, and we prefer to socialize on our own terms.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's just there are different ways of socializing, and I don't know, most of the autistic people that I know, you know, who either have gone through a diagnosis or are going through one, are very social, but just not in the way that most people would want them to be. Like, I don't know, I can talk to my mate about buses. I've got another friend, his special area of interest is natural science. Talk to them for ages, and they have so much to say, and it's so interesting. And you know, the councillor I talk to, you know, we can stay on the phone together and talk about anything and nothing for about 4 hours. We're very social, but we just have an understanding of the way that we socialize. And I think it is slightly different, but that's okay. And I wonder if there would be a lot gained by people acknowledging the fact that you socialize in different, like different people socialize.
Yeah, because that's definitely something people do need to understand about autistic people. As you're saying that, you know, you were diagnosed in school, and then that started the masking thing. So, and the thing is that I think it's when it comes to like when you're like young and autistic, then in like a school environment, I think it's probably that's one of the hardest places you can find yourself socializing. And because, you know, it's like it's harder to know how to, you know, like talking in games and make friends in that situation, because, you know, it's like you're jumbling with people that you don't know a lot about. And, you know, it's like you don't always feel like you can have the conversations that you might want to have. And, you know, sometimes it's another positive and healthy experience you address. And like when you was first like researched and looked up about your, like what you said on your like experience being autistic, like so like in your like at the end of year 13 in your school, when you was in school, you made like a list of different masking, like or ways you like how to mask and like a note on that. Hello?
I think I lost you for a sec there.
Oh, right, yeah, I was just saying that, you know, with like that, you know, like school can be like a place where autistic people start to mask, and like I think that's one place that I probably like that how people see us hard as find it difficult to socialize. I think can like stem from the a difficulty in like the school environment, as that's probably not the best space for us to make friends unless it's like in some sort of like interest clubs, or you know, like some groups where we like can easily find people who share the same interests. And like I remember when you like looking at the like I was doing a bit of research last night on like what could discuss with you, and like I like come across that you wrote like a list in year 13 of like different ways that you like had like a cheat code of how to mask like in social situations, and like as you say, it was like telling on like like the state of how we're like in like a school environment, and even in sixth form, that you know like you found challenges then.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, hang on, I can probably find it. Give me a sec.
Yeah.
There we go. I can find it, she says, running around with her little. I was showing this to a friend actually, who's a teaching assistant, and he works with a lot of kids with ASD.
Yeah.
So he was like, I really want to like bring it in to show my kids that like they're not the only ones doing this. So this is my little list of like things to say when you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And this is the same one I used in school. So this is the original. And I wrote that basically I wrote things to say that I knew would go down well with teachers because I was always in trouble. And I always felt like no matter what I said, they didn't understand that I may have been sorry, or that I didn't realize that I was doing something wrong. And I felt like I wasn't communicating that very well. So I wrote myself a list to make sure that I was saying the right things. So I would say things I have, it's my fault and I take full responsibility or blame. Violence is not the answer. I see myself as a mature blank-year-old, so however old I was at the time, future-proofing in this that I was going to age. Stealing is wrong. I don't know why I was stealing, but there we go. I will redo the assignment or project. I'm very disappointed in myself. Mr. or Mrs. Blank is a great teacher. It was not my intention to cause trouble or harm. Thank you for this chance/opportunity. And then those were the quotes, and then I had like attitude, so it was always blame myself, never insult anyone, suppress your real thoughts, be a sheep, be cute and apologetic, and don't lose the mask. And I can't remember how old I was when I wrote this, but I was in my early teens at this point when I was getting in trouble for doing things, and I continued getting in trouble through all of my schooling, and this would be in my pocket every single day. It's not in my pocket anymore, so I like to think there's been growth, but I really struggled, and I think it was being autistic, and it was also like coping with anxiety and depression and that sort of thing. I used to lash out a lot, not necessarily physically, but I would just walk out of classes that I was bored in. I would, like, if I didn't like something, I would just pull myself out of that situation, which isn't what you're meant to be doing in school. You're meant to like go to do things, but sometimes I just couldn't cope, but I also didn't know how to communicate that. So I just left.
I think that can be like something that, you know, like an autistic person might run through, because, you know, it's like I guess sometimes probably found yourself quite overwhelmed, or as I say that, you know, when you like read off like certain points, it's like sometimes I guess it's like the feeling like you're almost going like, I guess, feeling a bit meltdown or like sensual overwhelm and different stuff. Like, I guess you just need to sometimes have the ability to take yourself away from like space where you felt uncomfortable, or wasn't feeling happy in, and just to
Yeah.
like, I guess, you know, like, I guess calm down and relax and like give yourself some time with. And I guess like, even though you were diagnosed young and do you have like that, like your teachers already knowing about this, your
Yeah.
autism at the time?
Yeah.
I guess it really was telling of how they misunderstood your autism and didn't know how to support you being autistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Like
so yeah,
they sort I think, like I said at the beginning, there's been a change in the way that we talk about autism from when I was younger, but equally like just generally.
yeah,
Like, I don't know. I think there's certain preconceptions that used to exist but don't exist anymore.
yeah,
Really just the way that we not deal with autistic kids, but we think about them. Like I remember when I
yeah,
was a kid, like autistic kids were separated from the class. You wouldn't be sat in the same class
yeah,
all the time with everyone else. And it made you feel weird. And for me, I never quite understood it because I was like, if you want me to socialize, why would you take me out of a situation where I could be social?
yeah.
Like I couldn't make sense of it. So yeah, I always found that really strange.
Yeah, like, well, I never really found myself like withdrawn from the class so much because I guess like in school, like I kind of had to think of like kept quiet, never really told my classmates like I wasn't autistic until like sixth form or whatever, and then so like I was just trying to like, you know, like go, you know, like just say nothing about it and just like, you know, guess plow on through it. Because like as I say, it's so hard and like, you know, like feeling like the aftermath and you know, you don't know, you kind of almost don't want anybody to know it about yourself, like I found. And like, guess like, I think when I was that young, I didn't want anybody to like think any like different of me, and because it does take a lot to I guess overcome that internalized ableism.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's different when you've had a diagnosis at a young age. For me, like I've never, how can I put it? I've never like thought about my autism as something that was debilitating
Yeah,
until I grew up, really, because
yeah,
I was diagnosed, there was a note on my record. I knew it was there.
yeah,
And I continued as if, because for me that was my normal. Like
yeah,
I never wanted to treat, for me, I kind of was in denial, I guess, that it was a disability.
yeah.
And
I
it is,
believe
it
that.
is debated whether it is a disability, whether it's not.
Yeah,
But for me, I was just like, no, this is just who I am.
mm,
I'm just like this, and that's
yeah,
okay. I never thought that it wasn't
yeah,
okay. And then when it was only when I went to university, and I was living alone, I think that was the change, is when you
yeah,
are living alone, as someone who is autistic, that is very different,
yeah,
and things you need to sort of check in on yourself with.
yeah,
Then I was like, oh, okay, no, I have this thing, I have this, this is the way, this may be the way I am, but it's not always something that I can just discount. Like it
yeah,
is actually debilitating sometimes.
yeah,
You are allowed to struggle and
yeah,
be okay with struggling. Like, for example, I always struggled with, like, if something popped into my head, I would say it, right? I was very much
yeah,
that, and I would be brutally honest, which gets you into all sorts of strange situations. And then when you get to being an adult, obviously you're accountable for your own words.
yeah,
And I'd never thought of that. I do now. But that was a sort of you know, rude awakening that, you know, I was like, oh, okay, not everyone does this. Other people have the capacity to stop, think, decide if that's the thing they want to say, and then possibly say it or not say it.
Yeah.
So it was a skill I kind of had to learn as an adult.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, I think when you're like, you know, diagnosed as a child, I think it's one of those things that you don't always know. I can almost, you don't know what autism is in a way, because I guess you're just like, you know, like, you're like an autistic, but you're like, don't know much about it. So you kind of like, as you say, you just like have it on your documents, and, you know, kind of just like try to plow on life without, you know, with it in the background, and not knowing how to like see it for what it is. And I think with like, it wasn't until like, so like people talking about it on social media and stuff like that I kind of like understand new about it. And I guess when you like tried university yourself, or well was in university, then it's that amount of change probably made you find yourself struggling more than you ever did with like the overwhelming like sensory overload, to like sorting out with the anxiety and the different space, and so socializing with the new group of people. Is it?
Yeah, I think what helped me in uni was that I quickly found other people who were
Yeah,
autistic, which really helped because in a way we're all going through the same thing. But in a way it manifested itself very differently. So like for me, I lived alone for most of my university time.
yeah,
Really enjoyed that. And my parents always worried, and they were like, but aren't you lonely living alone? I was like, no, because I was lucky to go to a very small, so I went to Aberystwyth
yeah,
University. It's quite a small university. And I was like, no, because I'm in a situation where any of my friends are never more than a 10-minute walk from where I live.
yeah,
And then when I'm tired and I want to go home, I just close my door
yeah,
and I'm alone. And I can reach
yeah,
socially from that. But I know quite a few friends that like were in the same setting but found living alone really lonely, because sometimes, you know, their anxiety meant that leaving the house was hard. And I
yeah,
think through COVID it became more normalized to hang out online. I mean, having studied computer science, quite a few of us were doing that anyway.
yeah,
I think it's the definition of, again, what do we consider being social? How do you consider being social? And I think that's something that like people like, I don't know, being social has to be like a face-to-face conversation, when actually that's not the case. You can
yeah,
text someone and still feel a connection there. You could be on, you know, you could be on a video chat and still feel that you're being social and enjoying yourself, and different things work for different people.
yeah. As you were saying about, you know, like finding like easier to live alone, and other people might find it lonely. It's just that one thing of like, you know, two experiences of autism are the same, and and everyone, you know, like goes through that experience of university differently. Like as I found like 2 weeks in, like starting it, I found myself quite burnt out of like lots of the chains. And then as I say with the pandemic, you know, it kind of provide like how, you know, like beneficial online spaces can be. And, you know, like finding like people like yourself, you know, like if it was like for like finding autistic people, probably for yourself, to finding like more people with involved with the Liberal Democrats party as you are, and other computer science people. You probably found, as you said, you found that beneficial, and that can be more accessible way of communicating for autistic people, and when benefits of communicating within like Gen Z communities.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, so I really like Discord, for example, as a
Yeah,
platform, and the way that's organized. I think it's quite conducive to people who have autism.
yeah,
And it's quite interesting because I was thinking about this recently, talking to friends about this, being like, I don't know why I find interactions on Discord a lot less pressure. And I think it's because the way it works is you're a member of like a server, and each server is a certain place of interest. So for me, I know if I want to go and talk about languages, that's on one server with one group of people, and I can pin an hour of that. And if I want to go and talk about politics, that's a different server. And so already sort of people have signed up to these communities across the world. And you know they're already interested in the thing you're going to talk about. And it's so easy that way. Whereas like when you meet someone in person, there's always that fear of like going into a conversation going, okay, I might not have anything in common with this person. And what do I say? How do I start this?
Because like wherever like the social media platforms, it's like in this like big open space. And then, you know, like as I was saying earlier, that, you know, in schools, like socializing for autistic people may, like some of autistic people may find like certain clubs and activity hobby groups. And then I think is like Discord does provide like a club or like a group of like your like preferred focused interest, and then you can like avoid all the small talk and just like get talking about random different things. So as you say, like, you know, with the right person, you can end up talking about hours with like on anything and a thing type thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And like I guess before, and like I said, from when you like started engaging in the different communities, like as you were saying earlier, you managed to find all very different like people within a Liberal Democrat Party who were also autistic, and I guess that's been like beneficial from like finding a lot of like-minded people in the same like spaces like that, is it?
No, I think you're right. I think it is easier once you know where the spaces are, then you know who you're, well, not who you're talking to, but what sort of things you're already interested in. And then you can sort of work with that, and that's really nice.
So like we kind of covered a bit about like where I was like at school and university, to like different ways of like socializing and like some of the century challenges that you have. But like when also when to like talk about like the different things around like politics you mentioned, and like what as you were like a party political activist, and what are the things that you've been involved in the party that have helped autistic or neurodivergent people, or and as like to be a town councillor or to be like a political candidate and somebody who speaks within the political groups, what's been like things that motivated you to like help certain autistic and neurodivergent people?
I would say probably a lot of the policy writing around mental health, especially here in Wales. So I remember from the 2021 Senedd election manifesto, when we were writing that, I was the diversity officer at the time. So it was my job to represent, you know, the breadth and depth of different forms of diversity, including people who had disabilities. And I think that one thing that is often overlooked is the way that we do mental health provision and the way that mental health is quantified. So here in Wales, you know, as a Welsh Liberal Democrat, I believe in the fact that physical health and mental health should be valued just the same. You know, if you can get time off for a broken arm, you should be able to have time off because you've had, you know, a really bad day of anxiety and you haven't been able to leave your house. And I think that, you know, that is something that impacts autistic people, because in terms of workflow, in terms of the education system, it's not the same for everyone. Everyone's experiences are not the same. And that's what I was trying to get across in the way that we wrote those policies, in terms of making sure that physical and mental health are evaluated in the same way. Same with physical and mental disability as well, evaluated in the same way. And that's something I really hope that the Welsh Government looks into. There's a really good all-party parliamentary group on disabilities in Wales. And the person who chairs it, Mark Isherwood, is really, really active. He's got disability himself. He's got cochlear implants.
Yeah.
He knows what it's like to struggle, you know, in a public sphere with a disability. And I remember I did quite a few, either 2 or 3 disability testings. One was with Disabilities Wales. And I remember the preconception of like what a disabled person looked like. And for me, when I said to people, oh, I've got a disability, and equally that's only something I sort of only started recently saying, because again, when I was younger, I didn't feel it was a disability.
Yeah.
I was just like, I'm autistic. that was where it went. But when I said, oh, I've got a disability, I had so many people go, oh, we didn't think you had a disability. We didn't think that. And a lot of friends say to me, they go, oh, we never really, you don't come across as autistic until we spend a bit more time with you, and then we figure it out on certain things you may be doing.
Yeah.
And I think that is quite telling as to how people think autistic people or disabled people should look, sound, speak, you know. I think it's quite telling. And I do hope that other politicians are like more upfront about disabilities they may have. So I've mentioned Mark Isherwood, Welsh Liberal Democrat MPs that I have worked with in the past, Sarah Green, you know, she has a disability. She's hard of hearing in one ear, and it impacts the way people work with her. A lot of people say she's very aggressive, but actually it's because sometimes she's not very good at regulating her tone of voice.
Yeah.
You know, that where once you give people that little bit of information, they go, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Initially, people form these preconceived ideas of what a disabled person looks like, sounds like, experiences they've had. And I get it all the time, to the point where it has started becoming a little bit tiring. Because for me, you know, I live life in the way that I see fit. You know, I'm doing a PhD, I have 2 jobs, and people go, well, how could you have 2 jobs? I'm like, because I'm interested in these 2 things and I really enjoy it. And I'm interested in everything I do, and I pick up projects I enjoy. You know, it's that sort of view of things. So I think that's one policy area, is mental health. I think the other policy areas would probably be ones related to young people. And the way that young people access services. Again, when you are autistic, the way that you can access services, and even just the confidence you have to access services such as, you know, youth services, sports and culture services within Wales, that sort of thing. It is different. The experience we have is different. I know I always call it the Great Divide, lovingly, because people have this view that autistic people don't like talking to people, as we've discussed, not just being social, don't like talking to people. And for me, I have no problem picking up the phone to someone, but I know a lot of people that would prefer a message, and it's sort of knowing who prefers, and equally for me, I find sometimes sending an email to be more anxiety inducing than picking up the phone and talking to someone. And different people work different ways, and it's about knowing how people work. Again, that falls into the services thing, because there's so much now that if you want to do something, you know, even just to get a doctor's appointment, you need to pick up the phone. Some people, that's not an option. So changing the way and having different ways of accessing services, I think, is really important.
As you said, with that, like recently was reading a book like on the by like an off who's also autistic, by Untypical by P.J. It was good read, and like it did highlight how like the issues of like accessing health and mental health services, because, you know, like of having to like, you know, having a phone call and ring up, you know, like local surgery, or, you know, like certain like, you know, health you know, establishment, and that can be a great barrier, because like so many like times like you may have to like try to ring in again, because, you know, like it does take a long time to get on the phone with the receptionist. And as you're saying then about somebody with like, you know, people who have hard hearing and like who are deaf, and then, you know, like answering the phone and picking up the phone isn't something that would be accessible to them. So as you're saying, it's something that does need to be improved, whether that's, as you say, booking with an email or some sort like of a text-based online service, to actually being able to get like phone and get rapid like a quick and easy response, like to get like medical support is something that needs to be done. And you like to highlight that, you know, mental health should be treated equally as physical health, and you know, it is chronically underfunded in Wales, and you know, like you don't have exactly the same accessibility to like a mental health support person as you would maybe to like getting to like physio or referred for any other physical practice in a work.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, and that does need to be improved. It's like something that the charity sector does end up picking the work of what the government should already having to be done. And from what it seems to be like the misconceptions that people have around your autism and disability, that it's still a thing that people still got a lot to learn. As you say there, like the conversations around disability has advanced and improved since the first time you got diagnosed and you were in school. But, you know, like there's still a very long way to go off, like how we view disability. As you said, that some people thought you didn't look autistic or like showed obvious traits, and that's definitely down to masking. But it's like the constant, I guess, questions now into, I guess, challenge people to answer to the misconceptions of disability. And for a disabled person, whatever their hidden disability is, that can be a quite an exhausting thing for them to have and try to do.
Yeah, definitely. I think it can be quite tiring, but I'm glad the conversation is moving along in terms of what disabilities look like and how they present themselves.
Yeah, because it's important conversation when that is needed to be having advice. That
I think there's still this view that like when people think of a disability, they think of a physical disability. I find that with a lot of people.
Yeah.
They'll have this view that if you say, oh, I'm disabled, they have this view of like you're in a wheelchair or you have a mobility issue of some description or something. There isn't this view of, oh, I'm disabled because, you know, I'm autistic, and there isn't really like a physical manifestation that goes along with it. You know, but it doesn't mean it's any less debilitating. It can be just as much or more so.
Yeah, and as said, it's well, it's like if you don't have these conversations, the perception of disability, as you know, wouldn't change. And as you were saying that, you know, like you like hoping to see more people in politics are disabled, and if they already are in politics, to find that they are allowed and, you know, like are encouraged to talk about the disability as it's something that within politics, of course, that many intersectional groups do deeply need more representation in politics, and just by talking about disability can actually allow for some progression and changes in political action to actually happen.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also just a way of having it. There is also this view, I think, with disability that like if you're disabled, you can't necessarily hold down a stable job, you can't necessarily access housing in the same way, you can't, you know, there's lots of things that you can't do. And I think that if we are more transparent about those of us who do have disabilities, if you're more transparent about those who do have disabilities, then people have a working, living example of, oh, you know, this person has autism, this person, you know, is hard of hearing, this person, you know, whatever the disability may be, but them in an actual context doing the job that they probably love and are really proud to have. So I remember, I don't know, my housemate says to me all the time, the one he's a TA, and he works with a lot of kids with autism. And I think that, and it's the primary school level, and I think primary school is an interesting time because it can be very sort of hit and miss in terms of when kids get that diagnosis, how they react to it. So for some kids, it brings them comfort and they go, okay, now I know what's happening. But some kids, they're like, I'm just weird. And I had, you know, as a primary school kid, you get a lot of kids who are like, I'm just weird, no one's going to be my friend. And that is how the thought process goes. And I always find it really like humbling when I meet primary school kids, because I'm a governor to both the primary schools here, who I meet, you know, if I meet kids who have autism, I find it hard to watch. Sometimes the teachers can write them off in the classroom really quickly and go, oh, well, you know, we're just happy if he sits on the corner and plays on his iPad. He doesn't need to take part. And I'm like, well, no, you can get a kid to take part. You just make it interesting to them.
Yeah.
And you take that little bit of extra effort. And it's sometimes it can be quite hard, because it's like I look at those kids and I'm like, wow, that was me. And people were writing me off at a young age. You know, when I was in school, my teachers didn't think I would go to university. They didn't think I would make it past secondary school, really. And it wasn't for lack of ability, it was for lack of emotional intelligence, really.
Yeah.
That you know, they thought I wouldn't make it very far. And that's always really hard when you're a kid to hear that from an adult. I think really a tough, and it does sort of impact the way that you think about yourself, but also the way in which you view opportunities. So when I was in school, I wouldn't challenge myself to do things, because I always thought that people were like, oh, well, she's not going to go very far. She's clever, but she doesn't, you know, she's book smart. She's not street smart. But now, you know, every time I see something that's relevant to me or interesting, I'll apply. And I'm like, you know, worst comes to worst, they say no, and that, you know, I'm not a good fit. But, you know, just because of the way that I work and the way that I am, it shouldn't stop me from accessing opportunities that I think are interesting. So I always try and promote that to like younger kids, because at that age, it's so make or break the confidence you may or may not have, especially for kids that spend time masking as well. Because I think at that age, it puts a lot of stress on you. There's always this view of like, but I'm not normal. I remember that, like thinking that when I was a kid, going, well, I'm not normal. The other kids are normal, but I am not normal, is how I put it in my head. And to a primary school kid, that, you know, that's as far as you can make it make sense. But that does impact you growing up, because that thought stays in your head that you are not normal. You are not what the other kids are like. And thus you need to try and be normal. You need to try and fit in. And I went the other way and rebelled. I wanted nothing less than to fit in. And I didn't care who hated me. And actually, when I was in secondary school, I always used to tell people, I hate people, which was probably true until about the age of 16. I was like, I hate people. I don't like people at all. And people make sense of that. And I think it was that pushing away of trying not to be that normal kid.
I think it does take some sense of bravery and be courageous to be able to rebel and, you know, go against what people, you know, would expect from you, because that's something like I wouldn't have the confidence to do. And, you know, like I respect people who try to do that, you know, for themselves. And I guess it's like for you trying to make like things a bit better for yourself, with like how you were struggling with the school system. And it's like, if you don't talk to, as you're saying about like the primary school, that is an important age to have like positive conversation around autism. And I think even to non-autistic kids as well, you know, like to the whole class, just make people feel like autism is normalized, and, you know, that, you know, and just like it made it accepted and included, and actually give people a healthy definition in primary years of what it means to be autistic and being it's okay to be autistic. And as I say, like, you know, discussing representation of it, and that's something that I guess on a, you know, like a governor's panel of the school, you try to ensure that, you know, they are like discussing and, you know, promoting autism in a healthy way. As otherwise, you know, if you're not discussing autism and, you know, trying to find like helpful solutions and giving the best of what an autistic student needs, then, you know, you might end up with like another child with like that like masking list. And it, like you already said you did, and then you struggling with the depression and anxiety then. Hello? Hello.
Yeah, I think I've got you back now. There we go.
Yeah. Oh, did you hear what I was saying?
No, you dropped at the end there. Sorry.
Oh, right. I was just saying that, it's important that, well, I guess it's one of the things that you've done throughout, like, being a school governor is made sure that autism is like promoted, and like this like schools school I govern with, like is accepting and inclusive, and does things to support autistic people. As I said, I was going to say with autistic people, if you like educate kids on what autism is at a young primary age, autistic or not, like make so the whole class understands like it's okay to be autistic and represents what autism looks like, and that it is what it is, and like, and having a positive conversation around it. That
Yeah.
otherwise, if you're not having that way of including people and making sure they okay to be themselves, you might have somebody who's end up like having like a similar list to yourself of like how not to get in trouble, and like that, like masking list really, and
Yeah.
having that struggle with like the depression and the anxiety, and like just not finding schools a good time for yourself, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. I didn't enjoy school. I really
yeah,
enjoyed university because it was directly what I was interested in, and I didn't have to mess around with everything else. And if I wanted to not talk to people for a day, no one was going to make a comment on that.
yeah,
So I found that great. And it works for a
yeah,
lot of people, but it doesn't work for everyone, and it's
yeah,
sad. I don't know. I know a lot of people with autism who struggled at school, and then
yeah,
to college, we went to university, maybe just stopped there. But they felt really discouraged by the school system because they just didn't fit that
yeah,
mold. It wasn't working for them. And it's sad that that's how we lose a lot of talent, is just
yeah,
people. Well, I'm just not made for. I'm just not clever. I'm just not academic, and that's actually not the case. It's just that they're
yeah.
not cut out for school.
Yeah, or it's like you haven't had like the school, like experience that like would have made a good experience, like having had like your needs listened to, and like actually like you probably thought, even though you was like diagnosed and picked up as being autistic, then you never got in school what you needed in terms of support.
Hmm.
Like, or like what, or like having somebody like listening to you say, like, as you said, like certain sensory issues, or like in classes you're again a bit bored, and didn't really want to be in the classroom, and then like, because like you didn't have like the person I would be like listening to you about your experience of autism and what you needed, then that's like what what could have been like the make of like a decent school experience then.
I think it would
Maybe.
be like if schools and teachers were a bit more flexible about the
Yeah,
way people learn, and adapting, like learning the same concept but putting it in a way that
yeah,
those students may be interested in.
yeah,
Uh,
that's
I
definitely
think,
a good idea.
yeah, and also like I don't know, maybe making more of an effort with communication, or working with communication in a better way. So like my friend was telling me the story the other day that one of the kids he works with is autistic, is diagnosed, has moved around a lot, and has just moved to this school. And he does it. He's not non-verbal, but he
Yeah,
communicates singular words. Um, so it's a bit of a, they can't class him as non-verbal because
yeah,
he does speak, but it's singular words.
yeah,
And he said something the other day which was like very close to a sentence.
yeah,
All the other teachers were like, we shouldn't be doing this, and my friend was just like, is anyone just not noticing the fact he's come out with a full sentence?
yeah,
Like, we should be really impressed. And he's only in year 4, he's quite young.
yeah,
And my friend was like, it's weird that none of the other teachers seem to care that this kid who only speaks in
yeah,
singular words and gets across his point in singular words has come out with a full sentence. you know, even using things like because, you know, like it's a complex sentence, and it's those small things that, you know, in those early stages that teachers should be, you know, impressed with and looking at what may have caused the kid to communicate in that way. And then I think when you're a little bit older, so sort of secondary school level, again, it's about keeping that, adapting the work to be of interest to the individual, but equally all of the social struggles that come with being in secondary school. And I think that's where they really manifest themselves. So I think in primary school it's a bit more innocent, it's tame. Any bullying is sort of resolved in a day a lot of the time at the primary school level, but in secondary school it can turn a lot more toxic. And I think that a lot of autistic kids are not taken into account when that happens. When it comes to like mental health, how it can impact them. Even just like the basic name calling, you know, of being weird, I mean, I always used to get that I had resting bitch face, you know, like I always looked like I was angry. It was just because, you know, some days I was just tired of masking. And I think also that's the last thing is sometimes like I find that when I've masked for a long time, and I found this in secondary school, you mask for a long time, you get exhausted. Like I have to lie down for 2 working days. And it's so tiring. I don't think people quite realize how tiring that process is. And when I was in secondary school, no one ever explained to me, and I think I would have benefited from that, either a healthcare professional or like someone in the school, that when you are masking, A, it's tiring, but B, it's not something that everyone else is doing. So you don't need to hold yourself to that high standard. I was beating myself up going, I'm so tired. No one else is this tired, and I don't understand why. And it never crossed my mind that it was because I was masking and they weren't. And I was consciously making certain choices in my masking to appeal more to people that other people just weren't doing because they, you know, they weren't.
Because like I think it's like such simple thing that, you know, like just could make much more defenses if you're actually like listening to the autistic person and, you know, just like basically having a like chat or like engaging with what they are, you know, what's like going well for them, and actually like talking to them and like about the autistic experience, as you said, like about masking and all that, and something just simple as that, and you know, look at and you know, just listening to what's going on, and you know, makes a world of difference.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I don't know, I never really thought about it until I was older.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's nothing like, you know, you think of at a time.
Hindsight's great.
Yeah, definitely is. Like, seems like we've covered a lot of ground now. I'm just thinking about if there's anything else we would talk about that we haven't. Anyways, what is there anything like, you know, like you haven't said or you haven't got to say now, or what would you think would be something good to have said to the podcast or discuss?
I think I kind of touched on this at the beginning, but I think that you know, I'm 25 now. I've been active in politics for a few years. I think that as autistic people who understand a lot of these things, be it from our own experience or friends, I think we have a responsibility to, when we meet young people who are struggling with their diagnosis or struggling with, you know, being in these situations, who really want to engage in politics, in, you know, in anything really, that we normalize what we do and we talk about it. Like, it took me a while to even talk about things like masking, talk about things like not being able to work a room. But now that I have started and I can talk to younger people, you know, I've got a couple of friends, like I said, in politics, who genuinely thank me and go, no one else understands what this feels like. And I'm impressed because, you know, they're younger than me and they're comfortable talking about these things. But they'll text me on the side and go, you know, do you ever get those days where people, you know, you'll be in the office and people think you're angry, and you're not angry, you're just doing your work. Yeah, things like that. And normalizing the fact that autistic people work in a different way, we communicate in a different way, and actually that's okay. And the younger we start instilling that in people, I think, you know, a lot of that stigma will go away. The stigma that possibly we had to deal with. But maybe younger people hopefully won't.
Absolutely agree, because you know, like you know, like it's quite good just to have that conversation, like as you say, like after a long day, just like talk like, oh, do you have that experience? And it's like having a casual conversation about it. That, as you say, it goes a long way of like helping, like your mental health, like whoever's like speaking about it, their mental health, just like good thing, just like to talk to like minds of people just about those like simple experiences, as you're saying about like mental health earlier on, like I think it's like as simple as like having a group of people who are also autistic. They can like, as you say, pick up the phone and just have a text or phone call with, and just like have a conversation like that. And like it's just so simple way of making like bit of a day a bit better.
Yeah. I don't know really. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be a simple answer. I think that anything that you want to do has to cut across a range of policy areas. Like I think that with autism, a lot of the stuff is under, like health.
Yeah, definitely not simple answer.
Possibly sometimes education, but actually it affects everything in your life. It affects the way that you work, the way that you may be able to access housing, that sort of thing. It's all affected.
Yeah, I definitely, I guess I didn't mean to say like a simple answer, but like can be like it's like a simple thing that can just like make like a minor bit of difference sometimes. For, as I said, like in terms of like all the other different issues that like going on in like not like a person's life, as I said, like with like other like policy areas, then like of course there needs to be that. But as I said, like sometimes like if you're in terms of like the area of like having like a small bit like interaction like that, like can help in some way. I guess that's what what's meant to say.
Yeah, I think it does cross into other areas of my life. Like, obviously, I don't work in politics.
I know.
I work within science, and it affects the way that obviously I come across the same problems when I have to go to conferences and that sort of thing. But equally, just in the way that like social interactions work. Like, I don't know, I had this conversation with a friend the other day, and he was like, he struggles as an autistic person going on dates. And that whole setup. So I was trying to explain to him, he's a bit younger than me, so I was trying to explain to him that like you have to make it work for you, and that there isn't a right way to do things, and if people are telling you there's a right way to do things, they're probably not worth your time. But I think that even the way that that as an autistic person I form connections is different. Value is different as well. So I've always valued someone that like I don't know, some people like really need a lot of communication, whereas I don't. Like if I'm when I'm dating someone, when you're dating someone, I could not hear from you for 3 days and that would be completely fine, and I really wouldn't think anything of it. But some people need that like constant reassurance. Not one of those people. I would much rather be busy. And equally, I could forget to talk to you for 3 days. And you would have to be fine with that, because I'd just be, I don't know, working, traveling, whatever. Something else has come up. And that's
definitely get that feeling.
That's just not at that point. It doesn't mean that I don't value that action. That I work in a different way, and that's fine. I was saying recently the most romantic thing that someone's done for me was he made us a shared calendar. And I thought that was amazing, because I really loved being able to like share plans in that way. Like for me, that was an interesting mode of communication. I remember telling all my friends, I was like, "Oh my god, he's made us a shared calendar." And they were like, "Why are you excited by this? Like that's so sad." I was like, "Are you kidding? That's amazing! Like that's so cool. I can know what not know, but I can know what he wants to plan. I can see far ahead what we'll be doing." That's awesome. I have that like reassurance. I don't need that person chatting to me every day and wishing me good morning and good night. Like, it's just nice to know that we have
Yeah.
plans.
I think
And I don't
it's
know why I was like so excited by this,
I
but it
think
was
it's
so
one of
cool.
I think it's one of those things that, you know, like if you're talking to autistic person, you know, like it would make complete sense and you know, like, you know, totally get it. But it's like one of those things that, you know, like it might not make sense to like a non-autistic person. And I think it's like from those like small conversations with an autistic person, it's like, yeah, I can relate to that and totally get that. And then the moment, yeah, like you feel a bit normalised for that. And you know, like it just feels like just another thing. And but as you say, that you know, you know, with like relations with autistic people, whether it's like a close best friend or like as you said, like a partner that you maybe date, and you know, like you could go with like a week or few days, or like even like few weeks without like talking, but like yeah, it's still everything's all good, and you know, like it's like you're not always sometimes you're not always relying on that, you know, being committed to talking like you know times a day and all that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's I don't know, I guess it's the quality of the
Yeah,
socializing for me. Like I like that. I don't care how much it happens, but there could be just one thing that sticks out and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is so
yeah,
cool. And
yeah.
that's enough.
But yeah, but yeah, because it would be like way too exhausting and draining just to be like, you know, like constantly going out socializing all the time. And they've, yeah, go, yeah, that's definitely a thing that, you know, like can be quite draining otherwise. So like, as I said, quality is better than quantity, you know, and because, you know, like, otherwise, like some of it can be quite repetitive and I think sometimes if you're like an autistic person's having a conversation when something like refresh or new, like you're finding out, or you know, like of interest. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think
yeah,
that yeah, I think that it is just about like I said, the way that you socialize and
yeah,
different things for different people as well. Like I don't
yeah,
think all autistic people will probably have the reaction that I do, but yeah,
yeah,
and equally I didn't realize like from past relationships where people were really into communication, how tiring it was for me. Like I would be exhausted by just talking to someone I was dating, which is
yeah,
horrible to say, but it's happened more than once that you know, I then come out of that relationship being like, oh my God, I feel like a weight has been lifted in how much that person was asking from me. And you know, when I was younger I thought that was normal, but now I realize that you know it is about making yourself feel comfortable as well.
yeah.
While I never
Because
communicated that this was tiring for me,
yeah,
it's
because
nice
like
now to just be a bit more relaxed about it.
yeah, yeah. I say you got like feeling very relaxed and like finding that like kind of striking the right balance within a relationship because like it's important that you know like in a relationship where you both feel oh you know okay and you know like with it and you know that works for both in that relationship and I guess yeah so like I think we oh yeah I guess you agree with that you know and that sounds good and
Mhm.
yeah
Yeah.
so like I said talked about like the relationship things. Is there anything else you want to say as well? Or apart from that, you know
No,
what?
I think we
So,
covered everything.
yeah,
If that's even possible.
yeah, like I think we covered quite a bit, yeah, because like tend to do these interviews for like about an hour or so or whatever. And like you know, like I always tend to ask like a difficult question at podcasts. Like if there was one thing that I would change for the better for autistic neurodivergent people, you know, in the world or in general, like what would one thing that's like at the top of your mind, don't have to overthink it, what would that be?
Um, Probably the way that we're viewed in the media. Um, yeah, that is my bugbear of
Yeah,
like there's this view that we always look at our feet and don't talk and whatever. And
yeah,
there is that lack of the diversity that surrounds autism and
yeah,
the spectrum. So I think that's what I would change.
Yeah, because as I say with lack of diversity, because you know we on like TV or like you know as you say yeah, like certain media like mainstream you wouldn't really see many like people of color to you know be LGBTQ people shown on like in the media, and that does need to change because autistic people are diverse and that would help in so many ways. And like, is there anywhere thing you want to promote social media where people can find you online and that stuff?
Yeah. Well, you've got my social media.
Yeah.
Yeah. So most of my social, if you put Leena Sarah Farhat, there's not many of me.
Yeah.
So I am that person.
Yeah. Yeah, that person.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yes, with all that covered, I guess thanks you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's been really
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, it's been really nice to end, you know, to the interview. And so we may as well stop recording.
Yeah, no worries.